Hello and welcome to Face Off here on France 24. The jungle. Such is the name of an area near the northern town of Calais, where for years migrants have tried to make their way across the channel to the UK and have been stuck, sometimes living in very squalid conditions. Politicians from all sides have promised for years to deal with the situation, to no avail. But with next year's presidential election on everyone's mind, Calais has seen a flurry of visits in recent days, first and foremost by the president and by his predecessor, and maybe his successor, at least that's his ambition, Nicolas Sarkozy. With me to discuss how Calais and more broadly the migrant issue has become a political football, Philip Turl from Radio France Internationale and Stefan de Vries from the Dutch TV station RTL 4. So the president, François Hollande, waited for the last of his 5-year mandate, the last year, to pay a visit to Calais, promising that the so-called jungle would be shut down definitely by the end of this year.
Touching down in Calais for the first time since being elected to office. President François Hollande won't be entering the jungle migrant camp that's put Calais on the map. Instead, he's meeting with police and local officials with promises to shut down the jungle by the end of the year. It's news that's been met with relief by lorry drivers, fed up with the migrants illegally hiding in their vehicles in an attempt to enter the UK.
It's distressing to work now. It's become oppressive, really oppressive. We've got knots in our stomach.
You're always on edge, scared of being attacked, at a roundabout or elsewhere.
Not just being attacked, but running someone over.
Yes, that too.
Up to 10,000 migrants live in the shanty town, hoping one day to get to Britain. France is planning to move them to some 160 reception centres around the country before winter. Hollande has called on the UK to shoulder the burden, regardless of its recent decision to leave the European Union.
Je veux aussi redire ma détermination.
I would like to reiterate that I am determined to see the British authorities play their part in the humanitarian effort that France is undertaking here. Just because the United Kingdom has made a sovereign decision doesn't mean that it is relieved of its obligations to France.
De ses obligations par rapport à la France.
The jungle has become a major issue ahead of next year's presidential elections. Hollande's arrival comes just days after a visit by former President Nicolas Sarkozy. The right-wing presidential hopeful promoted his hardline stance on migration, saying those wanting to cross into England should be processed by the English. The UK last week began construction on a 1-kilometre wall to deter migrants from crossing the English Channel. It's expected to be finished by the end of the year.
Stefan, clearly a very sensitive issue. This focal point in Calais or in the area has been there for years. It goes even back to the early years 2000. It's a bone of contention, and really there's a willingness by all candidates to show that they're going to solve the issue suddenly.
Yeah, certainly. Like you said, it's been going on for almost 20 years already. And now it will be solved in 3 months, because the end of the year is in 3 months. It's rather optimistic, but it fits into...
Cynical, maybe.
Cynical, absolutely. It fits into the political rhetoric the presidential campaign has started here in France. It's a huge topic for a lot of French people, immigration. And François Hollande now shows that he is the leader in charge who is going to clean up Calais, which no single president before him has ever succeeded in doing so. So it's purely political, and without any concern about the humanitarian deal of the refugees.
Well, the plan, according to the government, is not just to shut down the center, but it's actually to relocate those people in 160 reception centers across France as a way to avoid having this place where there's up to 10,000 people living in a very difficult situation. So it's not just shutting them down; it's trying to make sure they're housed and fed in a more satisfactory way.
Well, the problem is that you can do this and you could probably close down the jungle and take all these migrants away and put them in other centres all over France and give them somewhere to live and make their conditions a lot better. But 48 hours later, there'll be a whole lot more people in Calais making a new jungle. We've had this before. When Nicolas Sarkozy was the interior minister under former President Jacques Chirac, he closed down a centre in Sangatte, which is just near Calais, where refugees were going, to a special refugee centre, saying if I close that down, that will solve the problem. It didn't, and these refugees were camping out in the centre of Calais. The problem's got so big now that they've created this new jungle, and it's got totally out of hand. There have been efforts to try to make it a little bit easier for the migrants in there, but they're obviously not enough, and more migrants are coming. So there are 2 points that are very important to make. The first one is, why are the migrants going to Calais? First, most important thing is that they all want to go to England for several reasons. A, because they speak English, a lot of them. B, because a lot of their family members are already in Britain. And C, because there are no identity cards in the UK. And D, they can find work more easily. The work laws are a lot more flexible in the UK than they are in France and other European countries. So they all think that if they get to the UK, life is going to be a lot easier. That's why they go to Calais. So it's not just a problem that is France's problem or Britain's problem. It's a European problem. And while we haven't worked out a solution to the war in Afghanistan, a solution to the war in Syria, a solution to the war in Iraq, and conflicts in Africa, like in Ethiopia, these migrants are going to keep on coming. So you can get rid of the jungle, but it will just come back again.
Right. We're just going to take a listen. We saw the images of the former president, Nicolas Sarkozy, going to Calais. Let's take a listen to the president in a recent radio interview about the issue and how there needs to be authority in France.
France's main problem is the state's lack of authority. I was in Calais, and I just want to tell you this story. I was in front of a truck. A dozen policemen were surrounding it. The doors of the truck were opened. Inside there were 15 poor men who did not speak a word of French and who were dreaming of going to England. I asked the policemen, "What will you do now?" They said, "Well, we'll walk them out of the port." And I said, "And then after, will you hand them over to the courts?" They said, "Oh no, we'll let them go and we'll find them again tomorrow." Well, that's a lack of power. The state has given up.
Stefan.
Yeah, Sarkozy always talks about authority and police and the army, but he never proposed anything serious, no concrete measures. This is a humanitarian problem. It's a European problem, and like Philip said, it's not going away. I mean, you can do anything you like and clean up Calais, but they will come back. And it's also a British problem because the British don't want to let them in. Well, let's face it, it looks very sad, all these shanty towns, but it's only 10,000 people, which is nothing. It's nothing. It looks like it's a tidal wave of immigrants overflooding this country, but France is in territory. It's the biggest country in Europe. There are no refugees coming here. Last year, France took in 3,000 Syrian refugees. 3,000 on a population of 68 million and a huge country. So they are not coming. We're just seeing these images, and the French, they think, oh well, this country is being flooded by the immigrants. So it's not a real issue. These are just 10,000 people, and if there
but that's not politics.
I know it's not politics, but there is no political will to give these people a decent living.
But there seems to be a political will to use this issue as a wedge issue, clearly, and maybe try to put pressure on Britain, because some are saying France has a deal with Great Britain dating to 2003, whereby essentially France would stop those migrants from going across the channel in exchange for a check by Great Britain. And some are saying, well, we got a bad deal.
Well, you've got the Le Touquet agreement, which means that British police can come to France and check the frontier in France before the migrants get to the UK. And a lot of people have said, well, we should do away with that and then let them go to the UK. And the Brits were saying, well, unfortunately, the entrance to the Channel Tunnel is in France and not in the UK. So it's better if we're in France and not waiting for them when they get over there. I don't think they're going to change that, to be quite honest, even if Britain leaves the European Union. The problem here is that these migrants are poor people who come from a terrible situation in countries at war, who are seeking a better life, and they're caught up in a European situation where no one can reach an agreement, and everyone is terrified of the effect migrants are going to have on the next elections, on the rise in populism, on the rise of the far right. And France is just in the same situation as many other European countries, and maybe even in not such a bad situation as many other European countries. The problem is that they are next to the UK, and all these migrants want to go to the UK, but Britain doesn't want them. So they're amassed on a frontier in northern France, and no one really wants to deal with the problem correctly. And it's not the fault of the migrants, it's the fault of all the different countries in Europe and Brussels as well, which is unable to impose its authority to take this problem in hand and to find a normal and good solution for all these people.
And obviously the main beneficiary is the National Front, because we see all those mainstream quote-unquote politicians running to Calais saying, I'm going to be tough, I'm going to be tough. But the National Front leader, Marine Le Pen, can say, well, they speak, but they don't act.
Yeah,
and she might be right.
She might be right, yeah, indeed. And yeah, of course, that's the reason why politicians don't dare to do anything about this issue, because they want to please the right-wing electorate, which is probably the large majority nowadays in Europe. So they're basically talking like Marine Le Pen. We've seen Nicolas Sarkozy becoming far more extreme the last couple of weeks than he was before. And the intelligent thing Marine Le Pen is doing is basically she's doing nothing. She's just sitting and watching the others fight, and she's winning the vote. So she's basically, well, the others are running her campaign, and that's of course very sad, because there's no one else who has a contrary vision, a humanitarian vision on what should happen in Europe with this refugee problem, which is not going away, by the way, because we will have far more. Yeah, it's going to get worse with the climate refugees. This is just the beginning, and so we need to find an answer to this very, very serious question.
Okay, obviously the campaign is maybe not the time to find such a lasting solution. We'll continue to follow the issue and the campaign here on France 24. We'll see you next week. Thank you.